Hi, y'all. We're excited to have you here and want to welcome you to Flatiron School's Intro to Cybersecurity, the Lowdown on Firewalls and pfSense. My name is Corey Mickelson, and I am the Marketing Events Coordinator here at Flatiron School. A big part of my job is hosting free introductory workshops like this evening's event, as well as something we're calling Tech Talks, where we cover hot topics in the tech industry within 20 minutes. A quick reminder, we're going to be using the chat button as our main source of communication tonight. So make sure you change that little button at the bottom from panelists and hosts to everyone so we can all chat together as you have questions throughout the event. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our host for the evening, Eric Keith. He's one of our lead cybersecurity instructors. Go ahead and take it away, Eric.
Awesome. Welcome, everybody. Let me get sharing my screen real quick here. Thumbs up when you can see it. Let me also make sure I can to full screen. Can everyone see this? We're good to go here. I need a pop-up chat. Awesome. Well, welcome. I am here. I am in Missouri, and I apologize. I usually go for my desktop, and I'm on my laptop tonight, so the angle and it'll probably move a lot on the camera, and I apologize, but welcome. Like was said, I am Eric Keith. I've been teaching here at Flatiron for 4 years now, part of SecureSet, the cyber program. So I've been here a good while, and I wanted to say welcome. And we are going to talk about firewalls this evening, specifically pfSense, but I wanted to start out talking about firewalls. So let's get started. And like was said, if you have any questions, definitely just reach out in the chat, and if I can get to them immediately, I will. If I can't, we'll get to them eventually. And so let's get going. So today's agenda, we're going to talk about what is required in just what do I need to know when I talk about firewalls or to really use firewalls. And we're going to explain what a firewall is, types of different firewalls, how to implement firewalls. Then we're going to go into pfSense. pfSense is a fun open source firewall that honestly is one of the most popular firewalls in existence right now. It's free. It's really cool to use. And so after this, if you want to go check it out, you totally can. You should have the resources to do it. So let's get started. So what do you need to know to use firewalls? And that's kind of, I don't want to say a loaded question, but as with a lot of things in security, when you talk about one thing, like 5 other topics kind of are in the background. And with firewalls, you've probably heard about them for a long time. If you ever used a computer, you've used a firewall. But what is a firewall? Well, we're going to talk about that today, but before we get there, let's just talk about what do you need to know even to get to that point. To get there, sorry. I got a question for some reason. My whole Zoom just popped up. But what do you need to know? You need to know networking. What is networking? For the first thing is, and we do teach it at Flatiron, but networking is how computers talk to each other. Well, I'll explain why that's so important. But networking is all about how computers talk to each other. And firewall literally is basically a thing that's between 2 computers to block bad computers talking to other bad computers. So networking is a fundamental of just IT, security, anything, just anything in the technology world. And you will have to have a basic understanding. I can't go into the basics of networking. That's outside the scope. And it's a long, long talk. But if you want to look into firewalls and you really want to implement them well, networking is something you're going to have to go look into. You're going to look into port management, subnetting, machine traffic, how machines talk to each other, and then on the flip side, systems. You have to know basics about a network, basics of systems themselves, operating systems, Windows, Macs, Unix. How do they work? Because you got to set up the firewalls. So basic knowledge of open operating systems is going to be required to adequately set up the network or set up a good firewall. That's going to go into knowing commands, how to travel the command line, operating systems, operating management of operating systems, key-based authentication, which goes into cryptography, way outside the scope of this meeting. But to really set up a good usable firewall, those are the topics you're going to really want to know. We're going to go into how to set up a very basic one today. I got a lot of screenshots. I'm going to walk through it. But if you want to go further and you want to set one up really, really well, you're going to need a lot of extra, not a lot, but you're going to want some extra information that I can't talk about in an hour and a half or in like 24 hours, really. It would take a long, long time to adequately talk about all of these. But those are topics you're going to want to look into. So let's get into this. And my keys aren't moving. There it is. What is a firewall? Well, I took it from the king of basically IT. If you haven't heard of this company, then I don't know what's happening. Cisco. Cisco is like the king of all IT. They have some of the biggest certifications out there for IT industries. They have just the most popular devices on the enterprise level. They've been around for so very long. And basically, if you have anything, if they say something, it's basically true in the IT world. And we can argue about that at some other time, but that's really just kind of how it is. So they described a firewall as a networking system or device that monitors incoming and outgoing network traffic. It's a device that monitors the network. And then they go into talking about how they've been around forever, blah, 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 blah. They're all more powerful than they used to be. But really, it's a device or a program that monitors the traffic and says, hey, this is good traffic or this is bad traffic. Now, that brings up the question, well, what is network traffic? Great question. Network traffic is the communications. When I go out to google.com or I go out to YouTube, to Facebook, whatever that is, it's not just, hey, it miraculously appears. There's a lot of stuff. My computer or my phone, whatever I'm using to talk to the internet, goes out there, goes through multiple of these firewalls, actually, multiple of them, and it goes out and says, I want this person at this device wants this information. It could be a video, it could be whatever it is. It goes and grabs it and then brings it back. That's the traffic. And it's actually all, I don't want to say it's all recorded, but every step of the way, there's something talking to something else. And when I talk about network transactions or network traffic, those communications are the traffic themselves. And like I said, we can get very deep. And if you get into security full time, you will probably get pretty deep at this. You're going to be able to read this stuff pretty thoroughly, and it gets very interesting. But firewalls look at that traffic and said, oh, they're going to a great site. YouTube is just good. But what if it's not YouTube? What if it's maybe YOUTBE? Well, we're missing a U. That could be a completely different site. And that's a lot of times what hackers do. They change, it looks so close that to the naked eye, it is the right thing. But computers know differently. And you go to the place and whatever they wanted to do just happened. So the firewall will be like, oh, no, that's not what you want. And it'll stop it for you. Or it'll stop incoming or outgoing traffic. That's basically what a firewall does. It monitors and allows or blocks traffic. That sounds kind of basic, and really that it can fundamentally be pretty basic. There's a lot of types of firewalls out there. And please, if you have questions, just go ahead and put them in the chat. I'm sorry if the audio keeps going in and out. Let me know if it's still happening. But firewalls come in either networking or host-based versions. And what does that mean? So when I say they're devices, sometimes they are physical machines that sit somewhere right next to your router, right next to maybe even your computer, but they might also be applications, just like your Google Chrome browser. They could be just a regular application that sits inside your computer. And that's what's called a host-based firewall. A host-based firewall is an application, you've probably seen it before. If not, you've used it and you didn't know, but it's a program that sits on your computer that blocks incoming traffic directly to your specific machine. That's different than a network firewall. A network firewall is specifically for, really, it's implemented strategically across the network is how I define it here, but it's a device that sits somewhere on the network that blocks incoming traffic to multiple machines, not just yours. It could be hundreds of thousands of machines, in all honesty. It could be as many or as few as it needs to protect. So a network monitors the entire network traffic. A host-based firewall protects the host space, just the machine. Glad the audio is working fine, Ron. But let's look at a couple. So I said Cisco. Cisco's here. And Cisco. There's a couple people. I think, Ron, you said you had CCNA, CCNP. So you basically know everything I'm about to say. Not going to lie. But anyone, let's look at this. I've got a couple here. And from what I just said, I said host-based versus networking. Cisco. Do you think Cisco is a networking or a host-based firewall. Most of their tools. Now I'm sure, but basically if I went out and bought a Cisco device, it's going to be, okay, basically they have both, but primarily it's going to be a network-based firewall. Usually you get a device, you can install stuff. When you think of Cisco, it's primarily a network. What about, let's say there's another one, this little shield right here. I don't know if you can see my mouse, but the shield right in the center. What is that? Who knows that? That symbol. I'm watching chats. It's a host-based, exactly. It's the Windows firewall, Windows Defender. Basically, that is the host-based firewall for your Windows machines. In all honesty, it is phenomenal. Modern day, and I'm going to say modern day Windows firewall is actually very hard to break into. It's very, very difficult. The modern day with fully patched system or fully updated, it's not easy to get past that. Now I try to find other host-based firewalls, but none of them actually had logos, and I would just have to type out the word. And I was like, I don't feel like doing that. But there's a couple other here. Ubiquity systems, you've maybe heard of them. Ubiquity is a great enterprise level for, I would say, consumer prices. So they're very, I would say, inexpensive compared to like high-end Cisco. For high-end Cisco, I may be paying into the high hundreds, high thousands for really, really high-level stuff. Ubiquity, be in the lower hundreds. Netgear, consumer prices for good, pretty good stuff for small, medium, and I would say home users. Then we got WatchGuard, same about, I would say the same level as maybe Cisco, between Cisco and Ubiquity. They're a little less known. Windows Defender is one. pfSense, the one we're going to talk about today. Honestly, pfSense is a network-based firewall. And honestly, it's the only open source one I have on here. But there are other ones. There's a lot of them. Basically, if you have a system, there's a firewall for you. If you're on a system, if you're on Windows, Linux, Unix, you're going to be using some kind of system. And it doesn't matter what it is, there will be one because you need to be protected. That's the thing. We're in security. I mean, look around what's happening. When was the last time, minus the whole, I'm not even going to get into the political of what's happening right now around the world, but just politically or in the world, when was the last time we went a week without hearing about some hack? Someone, something doing something. Well, a very well implemented and updated firewall would block a lot of things. And that's kind of the key point here. Very, very basics. The first thing to do is making sure that we have a good secure system set up and recognizing, do I want to protect my machine itself or do I want to protect the entire network? In an enterprise, even a small business, you're going to do both. On the flip side, sorry, I was reading the chat. On the flip side, a regular home user, maybe you just want to protect your own system. That's enough. And just trust your Comcast, AT&T, whoever your ISP, your internet service provider is, they're doing a good enough job because on their end, they should have a firewall. It'll go into the rules and stuff that you sign with them when you sign up. There should be some kind of security involved, and they should be blocking as a good fair amount of stuff. So implementing a firewall, where does it go? On my network, when we say we need to implement a firewall, what does that mean? Well, here is a very basic kind of internet, what's called a network architecture, or I would say basically how computers talk to each other in a network. And when I'm in an organization, how would firewalls be set up? How would I personally, or how have I personally set up firewalls in an organization? Well, at the top here, we have the cloud. As we all know, the cloud represents the internet. And I'm not going into this very in depth because, as I said, networking is just something you just have to get used to if you want to use firewalls really well. So we need to know basics of networking. But at a high level, I have two firewalls. We'll talk about why I have two firewalls here. But this cool symbol here is the firewall system. So in an organization, I would have in this, what's called right here, I actually have 4 networks. Yes, 4 networks. I have 4 networks here. I've got one with what are called the symbol for servers. So some of you, I think, Ron, you mentioned you have some of the Cisco certs. These symbols you'll know by heart. Other people, this might be new to you. Why are there multiple networks inside of one organization? Shouldn't it be one giant? Every machine talk to every other machine. That's something I really don't have time to look into, but the answer is no. Usually you want to what's called segment the network across each other. And then we have multiple machines. So I've got one with 4 servers between the 2 firewalls, and I've got another one with a printer, got another ones with what looks like laptops, a couple servers, which is what these are, a telephone, maybe a TV. All of those are connecting to the network or the internet in some way. And I've got another one with just a bunch of different machines, laptops. Looking at this, I would say, hey, this is a basic network architecture. If I went to the organization, I would say this is probably maybe the actual network that I would put my workers on. My main workers, if I'm at a coding company, that would be the network all my coders use. I got another one for the printer, for whatever reason. I got another one maybe for my receptionist, my management, whatever it is. And then I've got another one for servers, like I said. But at a high level, these firewalls are blocking the traffic. They are saying blocking my connection to the internet and saying, hey, is what you want to go do going to be allowed in or out? And if it's said yes, the firewall says, yes, you're allowed to do that. I'll go out to the internet, grab whatever I needs to grab, bring it back. And then as it's coming back in, it'll be like, oh, stop. Are you allowed to come in or out? And then it'd be like, oh, yeah, you're allowed in. So it'd come through the first one and then be like, oh, stop on the second one again. It's like, well, you're allowed to talk to these machines, but are you allowed to talk even farther in? So this is what's called kind of defense in depth, but multiple layers of defense and organization. But as we see here, I might say, no, oh, you're not allowed into this lower level of stuff. You're only allowed to talk between the firewalls. The big thing is implementation of the firewall is critical. That's why I say knowing systems and knowing networks is very important. But luckily, you're going to say, well, how do I get experience with firewalls? But while you said you have to have experience to put it in well, but without experience, I can't do it. And I want to understand it. We're going to look at some stuff today that you'll be able to use, take home, look at, mess with. But firewalls, the big thing is it allows and blocks traffic. So firewalls are not VPNs. That's the last thing. I wanted to call that out first. This is one thing a ton of people due to media, I think, and how it's published or released is VPNs are the golden ticket to do for your own security. I don't know if someone will agree to that in chat, but you've probably heard that on the radio and the news, in some kind of commercial somewhere, even maybe in movies, that VPNs are your golden ticket. They'll block and protect everything you need to do. Thank you, Ron. That is one of the, that's why I'm calling it out here. It is very misleading, and that's completely incorrect. I don't want to say it's completely incorrect, but VPNs are a big buzzword right now because for security, you just hear that. They're the golden ticket. When in reality, they may be, they may not be. All a VPN is a connection to a secure, hopefully a secure connection to another network. And by that means, if I wanted to go talk to, let's say I'm at a coffee shop and I need to go to a meeting. And I just, for whatever reason, my boss is like, we need to meet right now. I pull out my computer and I'll say, all right, well, I'm going to have to get into that network, pull whatever file out I can and talk out to my boss and hope everything's okay. Well, a VPN will connect to that organization and encrypt the traffic. I'll be using Starbucks's Wi-Fi, but that traffic from my machine to my company's machine will be encrypted. So it'll be randomized. The information will just be randomized and basically, if anyone sees it, they can't understand it until my company receives it and they're able to unencrypt it and read what I want it. That's all a VPN does, is it connects you from whatever device you're using to another network. VPNs can be hacked. But the biggest thing with VPNs is that we're saying they can be hacked. In reality, it's more of, can you trust the company that is giving you the VPN service? That's a whole nother topic. I can't go down that road. The big thing is they are not firewalls. All a VPN does is get you from point A to point B, whether it's Secure or not, that's all it does. And so when you get a VPN, and because we will talk about them a little later today, but when you get a VPN, you have to thoroughly investigate to make sure that they have good reviews and that they are a trusted company. Most honestly are not. That's the big thing. So you have to go in, look into it, and realize VPNs are important. They can be very useful, but they do not block or really protect much. They just encrypt your information to someone else who can then see it. All right. So network design. So networks are very helpful. As I showed one earlier, but networks are really helpful. So in this one, these are two examples that I have. The most basic is this first one here on the left. We have the internet and then connection to my firewall. And then from the inside of my firewall, just a direct line to all my machines. This is a normal network. This would be what you see probably at your house. If you have a firewall, probably at a small size organization. When I worked in small organizations, this is really all it was. They might not even have servers, or those servers might be in the cloud, and this is really it is. The firewall was just there to protect anything on the inside. That's normal. So it comes in, any traffic comes in, it's investigated, say, are you allowed in or out? If it's allowed in, it goes in, and then that's about it. Now on the flip side, this is a more intricate, not as big as the one I showed you earlier, but this is what's called a DMZ. Who knows why, or not necessarily what a DMZ stands for, but why we have two firewalls and why there are specific servers called web servers in that. I'm going to rely on you, Ron, because you said you have the CCNA. If no one else answers. Okay, web servers are more public. Exactly. It is the demilitarized zone. So DMZ. So DMZ stands for the demilitarized zone. It comes out of military talk, or it comes out of like military lingo, which most of security does. The big thing is, and that's Jeremy just said it, because the information in the second level, the app behind the second firewall is more sensitive. That's a big thing. Then we want to protect the servers from both sides. Great question. I would actually say the opposite, and I'll explain that. Web servers are more public, and DMZ is an extra layer of protection. So exactly. So this first, let's say my company has a website. I don't host it online. I don't host it at I'm blanking on all the web servers right now. My company, we have people who maintain and build our website here on location in our data center. And so any of you want to go to our website, you're not going to go to Amazon or AWS. You're not going to go to Google Cloud. You're not going to go to any web hosting place. You're actually going to go directly to my server. And I mean that. You're going to type in my website, and then the internet will direct you through its networking capabilities. I don't have time to explain. It's going to go to the internet directly to my firewall. And my firewall is like, hey, you want to come here? Let me verify you're allowed to come. It'll verify, and then it'll say, well, what are you allowed to see? That's where this little zone right here is. It says, you're allowed to go into these web servers. These web servers are outward facing, because you guys have to get to it. You need to know about my company. How am I supposed to sell whatever I sell if you can't get to my website? The problem is, what if you're nefarious and then you come in, because it's a website, it has to be outward facing. Doesn't have to, but it's outward facing. So they come in, you go in and they find a vulnerability in my website. That sucks. That really does. But you know what the nice thing is? If you get in there, hey, you break into that machine. Well, that machine doesn't touch anything else. There's a whole nother firewall between that. So great, you got into my web server. That really sucks. I'll have to fix it. Really going to cause a lot of problems. But on the bright side, I've protected myself because I've got more sensitive information down here. I'm not going to let you even into my telephone system, because who knows what. I don't want you to listen to our calls or traffic. But it just sucks. There are stuff that oftentimes have to be outward facing. You have to accept, it's called risk risk acceptance, where you accept that risk and say, well, how can I mitigate that at least a little? And in this case, I put them in between two firewalls, and this bottom firewall is going to do a lot of work and make sure no one that can't get in doesn't get in, or that shouldn't get in doesn't get in. Questions before I keep going? Trying to make sure we're following good time. All right. All right. So it does follow the CIA format. So Ron brought up a good thing, and I'm not going to spend much time on it. He brought up what's called the CIA. It does not stand for Central Information or Central Intelligence Agency. It stands for confidentiality, integrity, and availability. If you get into security, you are going to have to memorize that. Confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Every single thing, whether it's an employee, whether it's a file, whether it's a directory, whether it's a VPN connection, whatever it is, computer itself, you've got to say your company will tell you how confidential, how available, and what's called integrity do you want this to be. It becomes a triangle, and it says, all right, I want high level confidentiality. Basically, that means if it's at the very peak of confidentiality, it has no integrity or availability. It kind of gets weird there. But if you focus so much on confidentiality, there's other problems. But you're like, I don't want anyone to access it. Great. You don't want anyone to access my system. The only way to do that is basically put a whole bunch of concrete on it and bury it somewhere down deep in the middle of nothing. And no one, including you, can ever access it. But the big thing is, when it comes to data, you've got to say how secure, but also how easily can other people access it. Because from a security standpoint, we have earned the reputation that the better we're doing our job, the worse you get to do your job. And by what I mean by that is, the more secure it is, the more we spend time on it, the less likely you're going to be able to get your job done. Because the more secure, the harder it is to do your job. That's kind of the mantra that you hear. It really sucks. We did earn that. But at the end of the day, a good secure system is one that is protected, but also every employee can get what they need to do done. That should be a good, and it's a really, really hard balance to find. So Simon, you asked, is the first firewall the same as the second? They could both be Cisco firewalls. It could both be pfSense firewalls. They're gonna be two separate systems, but they could be the exact same vendor, the exact same. I buy them the same day from wherever, but I will build them differently, and I will configure them differently so they have different what are called rule sets. So the rule for the first one is people can come in. Rule for the second one is only certain people can come in. Hopefully that answers your question. So there is a firewall called pfSense. I've mentioned it a couple times, and it is the most used open source firewall available, based off of my favorite operating system called FreeBSD. That's not what we're going to get into. But pfSense is for what it is, for how free it is, it is very advanced. And I mean, it's on par with a lot of enterprise systems. If you go look this up on YouTube, wherever it is, you'll see a lot of places like, hey, you should replace this with your X. I've seen pfSense. I personally haven't, because it was a newer thing when I was in charge of these stuff. But I have seen a lot of organizations put in pfSense instead of a Cisco, instead of a WatchGuard, instead of a Netgear, because one, it's free, but on the more side, it's just a very powerful system. And a lot of times, medium and small organizations don't have a lot of money, so it's a good alternative. But this firewall, like I said, is free. The only downside that I really could come up with is you'd have to have some knowledge about computers. But the most common thing is it is just a program, which what I mean by that is it is just an operating system. It does not have a device. So it can, and usually is, a network-based firewall, which I mentioned earlier. But a network-based firewall is usually a physical device that sits on your network that has cables plugged in and out of it. How can pfSense is free. It's not on GitHub, but I download it. When I download it, I don't have devices that just magically out of my computer after I download it, a whole firewall app build computer just comes out of my computer. That's not how it works. So you have to take that firewall file and install it onto some kind of computer. This is a very common practice. And I would say if you get used to this, used to installing operating systems, which is going back to you have to have at least some knowledge in systems, OS management to be good with firewalls. If you are, you can put it on a Raspberry Pi if you've seen it. There's plenty of videos on YouTube about it. You can put it on an old laptop and it'll work phenomenal for 30 devices. A really old 10-year-old laptop, I could do great things with that. You could, I mean, whatever. Find a really old machine that's running a CPU in the last, I would say 15 years, get that running on there. It's going to do a lot of good protection. There's some downsides, but for the most part, it'll work great. And it will be a host-based, or it will be a network-based firewall at that point. Very powerful. Questions before I keep going? All right, Ginny, you said you can set rules and IP addresses. Yeah. So you have to understand what IP addresses are, what port numbers are, what they do. That's the catch. With firewalls, you have to have some background knowledge. You can implement them. It's just if you follow tutorials, you just have to trust that tutorial. You have to trust the instructions and that whoever wrote those instructions had your best interest at heart. It's kind of how it is. But if you know that information, at least even a little, you're able to do it yourself and do it pretty darn well. All right. Now, there is a thing, and I'm going to talk a lot about pfSense. While I personally love pfSense, I am not an advocate for pfSense. I don't work for them. In fact, the only reason I'm using pfSense is because it's a great demoing system. I can get it for free. You can get it for free. You can download it into a virtual box, into a VM. If you don't know what a VM is, go look it up immediately. So you have to have so I got a question relating exactly what I'm talking about. Do you have to have an extra computer to run pfSense? The answer is not necessarily. You can have what's called a virtual machine. Virtual machines are basically computers inside a computer. And I don't mean like a real whole new computer. It's a program that digitalizes a real computer and says, "Hey, I'm a real computer," and everyone everyone says, "Oh yeah, you're a real computer," but in essence, it's just ones and zeros. It doesn't have a GPU, it doesn't have a legitimate CPU, it doesn't have a graphics card. It's dependent on another machine, your main machine, but it's actually a digitalized version of that. It's called virtualization. So if you have questions and you're like, I just want to test with it, put it inside of a VM called a virtual machine, and you can install it, set it up, play with it. You can put computers behind it. You can do whatever you want with it. That's where Home Lab come in. Once again, that's another subject I just can't get into in an hour and a half. Gustavo, you said Netgate sponsor of pfSense sells. So they do. You can go buy actual appliances. So the company that has built pfSense is Netgate, not Netgear, Netgate. And you can actually go buy physical devices. And if you wanted a high-level enterprise, that might be the way to go because it's still not super expensive. But on the flip side, if you got a spare computer from who knows how long, that's perfect. And yeah, few VMs, anything. I've run, I don't know how many pfSense and multiple different types of virtualization. If you don't have VMs, I would actually say go learn VM technology. It is the number one. If you talk to, so question is, just a little sidetracked, but it actually is on topic. If you don't know how to use a VM, should you use a spare computer? My answer is yes and no, both. I would put it on a spare computer because if you have a spare computer, why not use that as a test computer that you can start learning stuff on? But on the flip side, I would also learn VM technology. If you want to get into anything that's related to IT, you're going to have to know virtualization. It is qualified as the number one greatest, the greatest technology to come out for computers in the last 2 to 3 decades. Virtualization made it so I don't have to go buy hundreds of machines. I can go buy 10 machines and to me, I only bought 10 really powerful machines. So I saved money there. but virtualization made it so I could actually run multiple fake machines on those real ones. So if you say, hey, I don't know VM, go look up virtualization technology right after this. Look up VirtualBox tutorials and start looking through that. Look at Linux and virtualization. That would be my number one recommendation. The next one is, why was pfSense at home if you have Windows Defender? Great question, because pfSense is a network-based firewall. Windows Defender is a host-based firewall. So Windows Defender only protects your main machine. pfSense is a networks, and it will protect any firewall behind it, any device behind the firewall. So it could be your gaming stations, TV, whatever's connected to the internet. Say, hey, whatever those are, I want the pfSense device to protect me, and it's a little more intricate than that, but that's basically you're putting as much as you want behind that pfSense device to protect. All right. So like I said, I don't sponsor it. I think it's really powerful. It's based off my favorite operating system. Honestly, it's based off of a firewall, host-based firewall called PF, packet filtering or packet firewall, I think. Very, very powerful host-based firewall that they use, and they created into a network-based firewall. Very cool from my standpoint. So this is what it's going to look like. And I actually used virtualization to build all the slide decks to build this entire, basically everything. So the internet is right here. We're used to that. And then I have what's called the WAN. The WAN stands for the wide area network. It's basically everything else on the outside of my firewall. Then I have my pfSense. It is a virtual machine. And then it is protecting everything on the right side of it. That's what's called in this scenario the LAN, the local area network. So everything that's local that I talk to directly, let's say if I'm at the coffee shop, everyone in the coffee shop basically is in my local area. So I don't have to go shouting. I don't have to go through the door and talk to somewhere else. They're right next to me, so I just talk directly to them. It's kind of what the local network is. So everything behind that pfSense, kind of the question we just asked, I am protecting. Where if this was a Windows VM or a Windows machine, Windows Defender would only protect this one machine, where pfSense protects anything behind it. All right, can this be applied to wireless routers? Great question, and sort of. Wireless routers would be behind it. So a wireless router would actually be behind this, and it would protect anything behind it that's going out to the rest of the internet, to the rest of the world. Now, you brought up a good question. Firewalls are not routers. Routers are about how traffic gets what's called routed to other machines. So if I'm at my Ubuntu machine and I wanted to talk to, there's another Ubuntu machine, I wanted to go talk to that other machine, I have a device that would say, hey, you want to go talk to this person? Let me send your information over to that person. And that person would be like, hey, I want to talk back. Then I'd have that router device say, hey, you want to go talk to this other person. And it would be basically routing my communications. Kind of, if you take it back to old grade school, middle school, where you're passing notes, there's usually one person or three people between you and the person you're sending your note to. It's you send it off, and then there's other people routing that note to the right person. That person writes it down, sends the note back, and there's a chain of people. Someone's like, oh, it's going to go to this person, so they send it back. It's kind of what that does. Firewalls are not routers. They just say this is good or bad. Now, firewalls do have often routing capabilities inside of it. That's where it gets confusing. Wireless routing, you're going to have another device that says, I can accept Wi-Fi traffic. And you say yes or no, and that will be inside below the firewall. And so any of those wireless devices that want to talk out to the rest of the world will be protected by the firewall. Yes. Okay, so pfSense setup. Pretty easy, honestly. You just go out. You just go out to the internet or whatever, pfSense.org, which is from the company Netgate, and you say download. And you go to pfSense, click download, and kind of from my image right here, you see this is the download screen, and you just say where you want to download it. The only one in America is Austin, Texas, so that's the closest server. And you want to click the closest one because it'll be faster. And you choose the operating system. It's AMD and might be ARM. I can't remember what the other architecture is. And you just say download. And it'll download what's called an ISO file. That's just a file of an operating system. Just think of it that way. When you download an operating system, it's going to come in most likely an ISO or an IMG file. And then you install that program, and then you automatically have Windows, Mac, Linux, or in this case, pfSense. Because in this case, pfSense is an operating system in itself. Like I said, you just have to have systems understanding to fully grasp all of this. But that's how you get a copy. And then after that, you say, I want to install it. And if you've got VirtualBox or some kind of virtual technology, you'll know how to do this. I can't walk you through it. I don't have time. It would take way too long for me to show you how to do this. But once you get it set up, it automatically just looks like this. You just click enter a whole bunch of times for the default setups, and it'll say installing the progress. On this system, I gave 1 CPU and 512 megabytes, and my install was done in 2 minutes. It is a very, very, very lightweight system. And 1 CPU and 512 megabytes goes back to like that. Those are from machines from early 2000s. Like, it would need other stuff, but it's very lightweight when it comes to that. So that's what it looks like. pfSense is command line. Itself is a command line system. So you have to have some system understanding to be able to operate without a nice, pretty, what's called graphical interface. So like when I log into Windows or Mac, I have a mouse. 30 years ago, you didn't have a mouse. You had to use a keyboard. Mouse wasn't even really a thing yet. And you had to say, oh, I want this. Type in your command. You just had to memorize a whole bunch of information. And here it's actually pretty easy. You just have to read through the menu and say, I want this. And I want one, click on one, do what it needs to do. But this is where it goes back to networking information. You got to know what interfaces are, what SSH is. Rebooting the system is pretty obvious. Reboot the system. So if you press 5, it reboots it. Press 4, it resets the system back to factory default, which means the original state. And there's a bunch of other stuff. Now, some people stay here. I don't. I'm actually a fan of command line only systems, but at the end of the day, it can be very helpful to use what's called a web-based. So while pfSense is strictly command line, it does produce a web interface. So kind of when we talked about websites, it actually makes its own sort of website that only you can connect to if you set it up right, that if you have another machine that's plugged directly into it, you can actually access. So here on another machine, I typed in the IP address of my pfSense, and since they can talk to each other, it brought up a pfSense web page. So I have 2 machines at this point. If you remember, this is my architecture. So this is what my machines look like. I have the internet, I have pfSense, and then I've got a machine right behind it. So this machine, this on the very left, the right, that Ubuntu, that's a Linux-based machine. That is how I'm seeing pfSense, 2 completely separate machines. But I can manage or configure pfSense by accessing it through a browser on my Ubuntu machine. And if that gets confusing, I'm sorry. Just kind of look it up. You'll start learning this stuff. But I don't have time for that. And so that's what it is. And as soon as you get here, it's like, hey, enter a path. It's already set up. One of the beauties of pfSense, pre-configured. So it has, hey, what's your username and password? I have the default credentials right here. You can find them by going out to typing on Google, default credentials for pfSense, and its admin is the username. Password is just pfSense. Jenny, you said, okay, so pfSense uses the IP of the VM that it's installed on. Yes. So for how virtual technology it works, it even virtualizes it so other computers think it's a real thing. So it gets its own IP address. So you use that IP address to access it. Yes. So that's a good question. How did I know the IP address of my pfSense to type in on the other machine? That goes into, I configured it here. I had to use some basic configuration and say, remember I said WAN and LAN? A WAN is what lets me access the internet. LAN is what lets me access the local network, and it's the block between them. So here it is. I have my LAN, which is right here, and I found the IP address. So that's basically how. You could use ifconfig, sort of. You'd have to open a shell first, but the IP address is actually right here. It tells you that. But you could also start typing commands in to figure that out. So once you have that, you just put it into a browser and you should be good. And as soon as you do that, and I apologize, I'm not demoing this live because I was telling earlier, sorry. I was saying earlier, I've been in way too many presentations I've ran where for something happens. Computer dies, internet goes out, demo doesn't work. So I have screenshots. I apologize. Also, there isn't much more I could show you, but I have screenshots because I'd prefer to have something than my machine die and I have nothing. So here's screenshots of exactly what it looks like. When you log in, this is exactly what you'll see. As soon as you hit enter with those default username and passwords, you will be brought to this screen. And it will say, hey, warning, admin account password is the default value, which means, hey, I just checked and the admin password is still pfSense. Please change this ASAP. And this red warning at the top will not go away until you change it. Doesn't matter what you change it to. Honestly, for this demo, I changed it to the word password, which is even weaker than pfSense. It doesn't matter what you change it to, but change it. And as soon as you do that, like that banner will go away. So the very first thing you do is log in, click on change password, and you'll be brought to this screen, the user management screen. So I'm going to stay here for a second. Why is it important to manage users, to reset passwords, and to manage the users on my network, especially to manage the people who can access my firewall? That's kind of a loaded question, but why do I want to make sure I'm in charge of who can access my firewall, the configurations of my firewall? I would say yes, security reasons, but that's kind of generic, as in this is a security class. So yes, but what are the security reasons for I want to manage the users? And why don't or do I want people to access the configurations of the firewall? Okay, for auditing for changes. So I'd want to say, hey, have there been changes? What kind of changes? What don't I want people to do? So responsibility is another one. Whoever set this up is responsible for the changes. So brute force, social engineering attacks. So those are ones. But really, unauthorized access, legal reasons. You're all naming really good examples, and those aren't the things I was thinking of, but they're good. The biggest thing is I don't want someone to get in here. Let's say if you're an attacker, Miriam, you're the one who answered very close to what I was thinking. You don't want someone to open up the network to attackers. Biggest thing. If I said, hey, Ron, because your name's popped up a couple times, I'm in my organization. I'm like, hey, I'm going to be out next week. Ron, and I just give Ron all access. Well, Ron is like, may or may not know what he's doing. He may or may not like his job, whatever it is. He could go in here and say, yeah, you know what? I want anyone to be able, I'm just having a really rough day. I can't figure this problem for whatever reason. Bill can't access his files on another machine or can't access a website. Instead of me trying to figure it out, let me give you everything. I can let everyone out, let everyone in. That's a terrible thing, because if I let everyone out and let everyone in, what's the purpose of a firewall at that point? But if he did that, one, I'm responsible because I gave him those permissions. But two, now I'm open to attackers. Even worse, what if I set a bad password? Because think of it this way. If an attacker gets in, they will probably not deactivate my firewall. They will probably add what's called a rule, which we're going to talk about soon. They'll add a little line into my firewall that says, stay running, but allow me to do whatever I want. Because at the end of the day, I trust my firewall is doing what it does. And I basically trust my firewall and it's doing what it needs to do. I can't be in all places at once. So I've got other layers of defense, hopefully, but if they can get into that, they can start doing some damage. So we want to make sure we are securely and smartly setting up my user management system. So I go in here. At the end of the day, unless it's like I'm the only IT person, there's going to probably be multiple people who need to get in here, maybe a whole IT team, and edit this firewall. I'm out for a day. There should be another IT person that can come in, make the changes, do whatever they need to do, update the system, back it up. So I shouldn't be the only one, but they need to be configured securely. So they only have the permissions that they need to do their job. They should have no more permissions and no less. So it could be there could be 15 people that access this, but everyone should not, no one really, maybe one or two people has full permissions. Everyone else has very limited permissions. Like they only can add rules. They can't remove any. They can only update the system, but can't do anything else. User management is actually key to a lot of this, because if that starts going away, there's a lot of other stuff that can happen, like hackers getting in. So once we change the password, it'll take us directly back to the home page. And if you remember, this is the home page now. The home page when we first logged in was a bright red warning said, please change your password. Now I almost immediately have statistics. Statistics are great. It tells me, hey, you got a wireless access point. You got, or not wireless access point, you got a wide area network. That's the connection to the internet. Here's the IP for that. Here's your local area network. So how you talk to the rest of the network, that's the IP for that. It tells me about my system. It tells me that what user I'm using to log in. So I'm using the username admin at the specific IP address. It tells me the name of the machine. It tells me which version of pfSense I'm running. It tells me a whole bunch of information, what the CPU is, which is really cool. I was running this inside of a VM and it found what CPU I was running on my host. Really cool thing, or really nerdy thing that I think is cool. So now that we've changed the admin password, very first thing to do, it'll take us right back here and we have a lot of things to look at. But at the end of the day, it's not really set up yet. It's just, hey, it's there. It's like, cool, I have a computer, it connects to the internet. And then if you just stop here, and a lot of people do, and I'm going to make that clear. A lot of organizations, less so now, but there's been big major hacks that have happened where people install firewalls. Basically, they did what we just did. Everything, they set it up, they installed it, added the users in there, and they're done. Have we actually done anything besides turn it on at this point, really? The answer is no. We haven't even configured it to be secure yet. We haven't added other people. There's nothing that we've done security. We just basically said, here's the device, let's turn it on. We have to actually make it secure. And that's one of the big problems. A lot of people don't. And so they just say, hey, I've got a firewall, we're good. No, we've actually got to configure it. We got to configure it to allow or remove traffic. Do you want it or not want that traffic? So looking at here, we have a whole bunch of tabs at the very top. We've got system, interface, firewall, services, VPN, status, diagnostics, help. It's really cool. There's a lot this firewall has. And one of the reasons I love this, and a lot of people love this firewall, is because there's just so many things we can do. You ask, can we change users if somebody leaves the IT team, for example? Theoretically, yes. Hopefully that person wasn't the one in charge and never said anything else. If that one person was in charge and didn't give anyone else the password, and when they left, they didn't give anyone else the password, and they were the only one to get into that system, that really sucks, because you have to break your way in or completely reconfigure the firewall. So yes, you can do that. It's part of the user management, but you're going to want to make sure not only one person can do it, because if that one person leaves without any information or something terrible happens, there's a car wreck, and this has happened to that terrible thing. That's happened for real. Organizations, one person holds the key for everything. Something bad happens to that person. Terrible thing, but no one else can do anything else. Pretty much no one in the organization can get anywhere because that one person who had all the information no longer is with us. So yes, you can, but make sure there's backups and other people can do the job as well. I would follow that. So here are all those tabs and the reasons why so many people love pfSense. because there are so many capabilities. And it's probably overwhelming, especially if you don't know what these are. For those that have networking or systems background, at least a little, you'll start seeing things you understand. You'll start seeing, hey, advanced cert manager. Well, what is a cert? Log out, that makes sense. Registering, routing, that's something I talked about, routing. Setup wizard, setting up the device, the firewall. Update user management is what I showed you. That's just in the setting systems. Then interfaces. The more interfaces you have, the more will show up here. But it's setting those up, making sure that they're the right IP address, that only certain people can access it. Then we have a tab just for firewall. And it has what are called aliases, which we'll talk about. It has NAT. NAT is what stands for network address translation. And I don't have time to mess with that, but it's how we have local area network. It's just how we can talk to people. Then set up those firewall rules that I've been mentioning. How do we say what's good and bad traffic? Well, we have to set up the rules for that. And then schedules, setting up maybe how often it wants to check for stuff, how often it updates, different things. And then we have traffic shaper, virtual IPs. There's just so many things. I can set it up as a DHCP server, IGMP proxy, network time product. Basically, I can get my company's organization's time from this place. Similar network management protocol. I can do so many things, including set up a VPN. Now, remember, I said VPNs are not firewalls, but they do really good things when they're paired together. And we'll mention that soon. Set up dashboards, DNS, IPsec, traffic. There's just so many cool things. If you know what they are, it's a very, very powerful system. Now, on the flip side, if you don't know what they are, they're useful, but you can still get by without knowing them. I just recommend you go and look into a lot of these because they really help a lot. Any questions before I move on? I know I'm getting closer to the end point, but any questions before I keep going? Awesome. And I'm glad I answered your question earlier, Ron. So pfSense rules. I've mentioned rules a lot. I'm going to ask, what is a rule? When I mention firewalls are all about rules, what do I mean by that? A set of instructions. What kind of instructions? Exactly. The rules are the instructions for who is allowed or what is allowed in and not into my network. What can and can't be done, an exemption. Everyone's finishing typing right now. MAC filtering, blacklisting, whitelisting. Good, Kent. I would say everything except MAC filtering at this level. Firewalls don't really need to do MAC filtering. That would be, I would say, on like switches, managed switches and computers. Usually it's stuff that when you plug into the network, it's going to do the MAC filtering, not 100% of the time, but usually if they can get an IP, then MAC filtering is kind of done. Port filtering, yes. Port filtering, kind of. Port filtering as in like I'm blocking different application ports, yes. When it talks to, and this is for anyone that asking, Kent actually brought up exactly what I'm going to be talking about in the next few slides and answered, just like most of you, exactly what I was asking for. He brought up what's called port filtering. I'm going to answer this in the next slide, I think, actually. But there are multiple things, and in security, we reuse terms. I don't even know how much. Like there isn't a phrase I can think of. We just keep reusing phrases. We've mentioned MAC address. It was actually, he just used it. MAC stands for mandatory access control, and it has about 5 other meanings as well, including mac and cheese, because I love lunch. But that we just keep reusing the same terms over and over and over. So port filtering, there are 2 things that could refer to. It could say, am I blocking application ports like port 22, which stands for SSH, HTTP port, which is port 80, which we'll talk on the next slide, or am I blocking the actual ports on my computer that you plug into? Because those are things you block as well. It does not mean that one. It means the first one. but that's a great question. And the reason I sidetracked to that is because that's a very good question. In security, you want to block both, but we're talking specifically about firewalls. Firewalls usually don't block physical access. They block technical access. So a rule is a set of instructions that say, I'm going to allow or disallow this. There's actually 3 instructions. It's allow, deny, or drop. And I'm not going to mention drop much, but basically deny says, oh, Ron, I don't want the, basically Ron goes to my firewall and says, I want to talk to machine 2. And so he's like, okay, the firewall makes sure he can. Like, oh, it looks like machine 2 doesn't want to talk to you. And he will get that response back with a deny. He'll be like, oh, I guess I can't talk to it. But a drop will basically, hey, he's going to say to the firewall, oh, I want to talk to the firewall. And he will never hear back from the firewall. I'm sorry, Ron. But the messages are just going to get dropped. There is no response in a drop. So that's the difference. Usually you pick one or the other, depending on if you want a response to the person who's asking for the information or not. A lot of times drop is just what happens is if they're asking for something and I don't want them to have it, just don't even respond to them. So firewall rules are all about filtering traffic. We want to make sure only good traffic comes in and leaves our network. Rules are how we accomplish this. We as firewall administrators create rules that tell the firewall what applications, machines, the traffic we want to use on our network are basically allowed. Sorry, I messed that up. But basically it's just what is allowed and not allowed into our system. So at the bottom here, this is kind of me setting one up. These are the rules. If you can see here, it's under the rules tab. And it says there's 2 pre-built ones when you set up IP table, or not pfSense, excuse me. When you set up pfSense, you have 2 pre-built ones. And then there's this one down here. This second picture is me setting up a rule. And it says, all right, what do you want to do? I want to block. Then it says interfaces. What interface do you want to block things from? I want to block interactions that are coming in from the WAN. So which is that's the internet, remember? And then what kind of information? IPv4 goes into IP addressing, IPv4 with IPv6, different types of talking, network stuff. Then what protocol? More network stuff, TCP. You just have to have networking background to really get all this. But you can still set it up. You just won't understand everything. And it says, where's it coming from? Once again, coming from the WAN, anything that comes over the internet, from the internet, and it goes to, I can specify very specifically, I'm going to say specify anything. And I said, specify to literally any device on my LAN network is what I've said. Any device. I could have set a specific machine or a specific group of machines, or just said anything. And I said, from anywhere out in the rest of the world to any machine that's in my company, I want to, as I said in action, block. And then I said destination port. So we've talked about as ports, how does this information get in? Well, think of it like house. You don't just automatically walk into a house. You got to go through some kind of door to get into the house. Same with machines. There's some kind of door. These doors are called ports that you have to have open to be able to get into the system. So what I'm saying is here, if anyone from the outside world trying to access my machines inside my organization, so from WAN outside to LAN internal, trying to use door or port number 88, block them. That's what that is saying. This will be recorded, so if you need to watch this again in 24 hours or however, watch that again in 24 hours for that to make sense. But what I'm doing is I'm blocking inbound traffic from the internet to my local network over port or door 8080. And I'm saying, no, I don't want that, block it. So there are a lot of rules. And this comes directly. I copied and pasted, I don't want to say copied, I took screenshots of the pfSense website. Netgate, they're the company that made pfSense. They have set up pfSense basic configuration document. And so I just said, all right, here are all the ports, the most common ones we need to know about. And here's the basic configuration. They're like, hey, if you don't know what you're doing, just type this stuff in and you'll be pretty good to go. So you're gonna have the recording. And in the slide decks if I can get those available for you. But this is what this is. It's saying block door 53, both TCP and the UDP side of it. Block or allow. It's actually allow. We don't want to block 53. Allow 53. That's basically how I can do what's called DNS. I don't have time for that. Then we've got port 80. How do I talk to the rest of the world? Port 80 or port 443. So we got to let them, if I want to go to any website, got to definitely get port 443, because no website will really load without me opening this door. That's the door for me to access other people's websites. Port 21, how I get files. Port 22, access other machines. Yeah, Ron just said, talk about if we blocked 53, there'd be a giant traffic jam. And for anyone who understands what DNS is, that he is very correct. So always allow port 53, or DNS. But so we got TCP 21, TCP 25. These are all the most common ones. If you do emailing, you got to open ports, because yes, how do I get email? There are specific doors emails have to go through, just like there are specific ports or doors that web traffic has to go through. I got to open ones for email, open ones for just about anything. Basically, anything you do has a specific port or door that has to go over. So those are the stuff I need to allow and block. And then that's the stuff going out. Then that's just the doors I have to open that allows me to go talk over other stuff. So anyone inside my organization that wants to go out, I'm saying these are the only doors that they're allowed to go through. Anything that says port 80, port 443, port 53, those are the only things. Any other doors, nope, block it. Now I'm saying anything that's coming out from the rest of the world internally, it's even smaller, because we're going to block even fewer, and basically we're going to block everything. So unless they're opening port 53, 443, we're not allowing it through. Literally, if they're not asking for port 443 or port 53, they're just not getting through our firewall, which is actually a very good way to do that. So this is what that looks like. And this is taking it directly from the pfSense basic configuration documentation. It's on their website. And when I showed you in this last slide, destination port range, I just clicked that drop down. Now I said other because I have a custom one, but these are pre-configured. Like I said, port 21 is right there, port 53 right there, because these are the ones it's going to know you're going to have questions about. So it's like, I know you're going to ask about these, so I've already have a drop down for you. But if you're like, I want other, you can specify a specific port, and there are reasons you would do that. All right, then we have white and blacklisting. We've kind of already mentioned it, but you can set up not just rules for what ports to go over, you can set up rules for what machines or websites that are allowed to talk to you. So I might say, I want only my employees to go out to Google. We don't like Yahoo in my organization, so if they try to use Yahoo, block it. Especially Bing. If they try to use Bing, we are not allowing that. We don't want our picture of the day. We don't want any of that. If they try to go out to Bing, we are stopping at all costs. Where would I stop that? Firewall. So that's what I can set. And what I'm saying is we're going to stop it, is that would be in what's called a blacklist. I have a list of anything I want to block. I literally just have a list. In the firewall, any traffic that goes through, it's like, all right, are you on my list? Yep, you're not allowed in. That's a blacklist. And you can see me kind of setting one up here. I set up 3 aliases, and I have 2 random things here. But these are IP addresses. It's actually supposed to be domain names, but it's just me typing stuff in, and it says, all right, I don't want these things. So if anyone from the outside world, in this case, tries to access my machines from these, they'll get blocked. Or I could set it up for anyone from internally tries to go out to these places, they're blocked. On the flip side, we have what's called a whitelist. What do you think a whitelist is if a blacklist blocks everything? Okay, yes, allows. That it's even more secure, I would say. But why do you think blocklist, and I kind of have alternative we can create or deny, but why do you think whitelists, they're easier to set up? Because I'm literally just saying these are the few things, and those are the only things we're allowing. Why are they harder to maintain? They are more secure, I would say, but they're harder. Whitelists are much harder to maintain. if I'm saying this is the list of only things they're allowed to do. So due to time, I'm going to answer that. It's because every new thing you got to do, I got to add more stuff to. Now the answers are rolling in. But everything new that needs to be allowed, I have to go to my whitelist, allow it. It's just a lot of work. And at the end of the day, you can't think of every possible thing. So on the flip side, we're going to allow everything except what's on the blacklist. So if we find a new threat, a new problem, just add it to the blacklist. It just won't be a problem again. It's a lot easier. It's still very secure. It's just, I mean, it's not as secure as only specific things, but it's still manageable and provides security. All right. So backups, we're almost done. The next thing is backups. Very few people, just like user management, think of backups. I've run into problems. I know many people that run into problems and they still forget about backups. Why are backups critical? Even taking a backup of your firewall configuration. If you've worked in any organization, you've probably been told, make sure you back up your system. Same thing here. Make sure you back up your firewall system. Why? Reconstruct, exactly. Things are going to happen, whether it's intentional, and that could be like a DDoS or a DOS attack. Yes, you might be attacked. I think someone mentioned earlier, but something might happen where an organization, a criminal organization, or something you do unintentionally basically sends so much traffic, that's what a DOS attack is, sends so much traffic that hole, basically there's a gate, that's what the firewall is, it's a gate. And it says, all right, and one by one, checks every single thing that comes in. Well, what if there's so many people, so much traffic that it just gets overwhelmed? That happens. If that happens, the firewall might freeze. If it's not told what to do, it could just overheat. There's a lot of things that could happen. Usually it just comes offline for a while, but there's a lot of problems, and that's not the only thing. Someone could get in there and completely delete the configuration, nullifying the firewall itself. And if there's no configuration, anything can be allowed in or out. So without a backup, how am I supposed to get this up and running? Do I have to build every single thing again? Because from that list I just showed you, there was probably like at least 15 rules of what's allowed and not allowed. And as the days go by, you're going to have more. You're going to keep adding to it. So it's not unheard of to have hundreds of different rules. And imagine that gets wiped away, having to rebuild every single one. So you back up. So if it does go down, you just spin another one up. And right here, it says restore the configuration. You just upload the backup file, bam, right there, same IP address it needs, same rules that are there automatically, and it's within like 5 minutes. I'm not saying it's going to take that. I'm not going to say it's only going to take 5 minutes, but you can get back up and running pretty darn quick. That's the key. And it's important. If you're without a firewall, you're going to be breaking a lot of compliance, which there are rules that you have to follow in security. And you have to have a firewall if you're protecting certain kinds of data. So you're breaking compliance when it's not running, and you're very insecure. So backups are critical. You'll hear about them all the time in security. Next thing are logs. Now, firewalls aren't great places to monitor logs, but if you don't have what's called a SIM up and running or a log management device, you can go in here. Let's say I know something bad happened, but I just can't find it. Well, the log is a journal of everything that's occurred, that's been saved. Basically, logs will eventually get removed because they take up space. But if I have a record of it, I can go into here and say, well, what's happened? This, and this has happened. And that's what a firewall does. I mean, that's what a log does. It tells me what's happened. Here, it's at March 23rd at 3:30 or 15:30 in 12 seconds, something over the LAN interface occurred in a deny request. There's a bunch of them. It is actually just me setting this up, but I can go into here. You'll see there's systems, there's firewall, So system logs, so about people logging in, password changes. Firewall, actual access. DHCP, people gaining IP addresses. Authentication, people actually authenticating. So setting out keys, that type of thing. IPsec, that's where I'll find stuff about secure connection, kind of like OpenVPN, which we're about to talk about. Name time. There's just a bunch of logs. This is where I can go to find out, well, what's happening? Why did I get DOSed? Why did the firewall go offline? Well, this is a great place to go look because it's a record of what's happened. So pfSense has a very good system. I've been on firewalls that do this terrible, or I can't find the logs. pfSense does it very, very well. And then we have, finally, VPNs. So earlier I did mention VPNs are not firewalls. Once again, they are not firewalls. They are all about encrypting traffic from one place to another. They are used in multiple different ways. They originated from, especially when employees were on the road or would maybe have to work from home or overseas, somewhere else. How do they access the company securely? That's where VPNs came from. They still do that a lot. Every day people are using VPNs for that. But VPNs also do other things commercially now. So I can download, and I have a VPN app on my phone. They do the exact same thing. But in a world, in an enterprise level, if you're connecting to our company VPN, that means on one device, probably your company laptop, you have software that lets you connect to my firewall, my company's firewall. So someone, I'm just looking at random names, Teresa, let's say she's over here and she's like, I work for your company. I need to gain this file because I'm working from home right now. She would boot up the VPN software from her internet, connects, the VPN would then connect to my company's firewall. That's the big thing. Usually it's called a VPN concentrator, but usually it's built into the firewall. And it would say the firewall would receive that traffic and says, oh, you're using a VPN. Great. Let me validate that you're supposed to be here. And then it validates that you're supposed to be here. And then it lets you talk to the rest of the world. And honestly, to everyone behind the firewall, it's like you're actually there physically there. No one knows that even computers have no idea you're on a firewall. You're basically on a VPN, but you are. So that's what a VPN came from. Now you're like, well, I have VPNs. I can get them on my phone. I can get them from my ISP, which is my internet service provider. And what does that mean? Very quickly, that means you are connecting to someone else's computer. And that's where I said earlier, if you don't trust that person, you are connecting to a company that you may or may not trust. And you downloaded that app, you booted that VPN up, and it says here you might have a map of a whole bunch of servers you can connect to or countries. And I'd be like, cool. You just trust this company, one, is not selling your data, which, that's a security stereotype that we're always worried about that. But you have to trust that because, yes, that happens and happens every few seconds. There's a lot of documentation on that. On the flip side, you're also trusting that they're not watching your traffic because from point A to point B, from my machine to their machine, it's encrypted. But on my side, it's not. On their side, it's not. Only the tunnel between the two is where it's encrypted. On their side, they basically decrypt it. And so who's to say someone on that side isn't watching what's happening? So that's what a VPN is. They are very, very helpful if you trust the platform and the company you're getting your VPN from. If you do not, or you can't say you trust them, all it is you're connecting to someone else's network and they may or may not be taking your data. They may or may not. And there's plenty of records. Just type it in VPN problems. You're going to find so many where that's why a lot of people in the chat were saying VPNs can be insecure. Honestly, they very well can be. And I'm not going to say which ones because I don't want to get on the line for which ones are good or bad. There are notable ones out there. NordVPN is one of them. It's been up and down. It has been known to be, and it's not the one I use, but NordVPN over the last few years has become better. But a few years ago, it was found out that someone got into it. It wasn't from insider, but someone was able to do something and get the traffic. There's NordVPN, which is common. Your ISP might give one out. It sucks. If you don't trust your ISP, do you trust their VPN? There's a bunch there. Look it up. There's Proton VPN, NordVPN, which is, I would say, it's not bad. And there's a list of good ones, but be very careful because, like I said, all you're doing is connecting to someone else's machine. And if you don't trust them, then is it good or bad? I would say hands down, VPNs, if you trust the company, are safe. That's the catch. So me to my company, yes, I trust my company. In fact, that's why I have this work computer and where I can work from home. Now, not necessarily Flatiron, but a lot of companies, yes, they trust the VPN because it's from them to that server. Why am I having this talk? Because you can set up a VPN server. You from anywhere in the world or from other machines in your house can connect directly into, you can set up a VPN server basically with pfSense. Very cool. So let's say you don't trust anywhere. You don't trust you're at Starbucks and you're like, I don't trust everyone here. I can't trust any other company. Well, guess what? You can set up a VPN server at your house and connect directly to that because you trust your home network. And from your home network, you talk out to the rest of the world. So pfSense is trustable because it's you. So pfSense is just a program. They're not, you set up the program, you run the program. So I would say, yeah, it's trustable. It's all about how you do it and how you use it. I hope I answered those questions. And I've got 3 minutes. Good. Questions? If VPN is not from a company, is it from antivirus? It's from there is somewhere in the world, some company or individual that hosts your VPN. So it is from someone. It might be a firewall antivirus company, but they are also a running as a VPN company as well. I hope that answers that question. But if you're connecting to them, they are a VPN company, or they're hosting your VPNs. Thank you, Ron. Any other questions? Do we need same configurations? I would say, yeah, that's why I said it doesn't matter what firewall you're on. The great thing about pfSense, so the question is, do we need the same configuration for commercial firewalls like Cisco? It's going to be almost identical configurations. At this level, there are minute differences between enterprise level firewalls, but they're going to look and be set up very similarly. Does Flatiron offer more cyber training? I think yes. I am a cyber instructor for Flatiron. We have a cyber program. I don't know if I don't know how to answer that if I'm the one who's supposed to talk about that, but yes, we do have more cyber training. Please contact us. And we are happy to help with that because yes, we do host it.
I will throw a link in the chat for y'all.
Good. Does Flatiron accept GI Bill? Great question. And
that is another question for our beautiful admissions team. Unfortunately, yes. It's a little more complicated than just a yes or no. So I'm going to put a link in the chat that you can schedule a 10-minute chat with one of our admission specialists and they can answer all of your questions.
The next one is free VPN or paid VPN. Is there a difference? Which is more secure? Depends. I know it depends. I would honestly, in this scenario, I trust paid more than unpaid. That's a catch, because who's to say that that company I'm paying is actually good? So you really got to verify the company that you're housing. That's the big thing. That's why there are so many cheap VPNs. They say, hey, we're a VPN and it's only like $1 a month or $5 a month. Yeah, but it's great you offer VPN technology, but do you trust them? Because there are, like I said, hundreds of places that have been found out. Yes, you're just paying them. And when you sign that agreement, you're basically signing they can watch everything. It's just, so even if not, who's to say they're not? And oftentimes I hate it because that's the stereotype where we're always worried, but we got a lot of statistics to back that VPN one up. And so this is a big hot debate right now that we're having. And we're about firewalls, but the VPN one it's a big thing. A lot of places are just don't use VPNs. Don't use any guest networks, don't use any VPNs because we can't trust, unless you absolutely trust that place, they're not worth it. All right, so is it safe or best security practice for a company to not allow a contractor access to their VPN? Depends what the purpose of that contractor is. It depends what the purpose of the contractor. You set up what networks inside the organization they're allowed to talk to. Yes, it's okay. It's how you set it up. But if they're not supposed to be in our network, why are we giving them access to our network? That's what I would say. All right. Is cybersecurity changing as quickly as development? I'm not 100% sure what you mean by that. Like the world develops. Cybersecurity, I've been in a lot of industries. Cybersecurity, there's always, like, go to the news, hands down, you will find at least 2 or 3 cyber articles about something that happened somewhere around the world, especially in Europe, Asia, like that area. There's always every few minutes someone did something. So yes, it is a very, very rapidly changing world. All right, Norman, you asked, you were for a fintech company in fraud ops and have several IT certs. How would you get into cybersecurity? First thing for that is I would look, does your company have the option to just switch departments? If you have multiple IT certs, maybe. The flip side is you can go to a boot camp like us. Truthfully, I will say we focus, because I'm the teacher, we focus at people that have no experience in the field going through the cyber program. Now, I do have a lot of IT people that go through that have had a couple years, but if you have a number of IT certs, you're probably been there for like 4 to, especially if you're in an ops team, you might already qualify. Like, I hate to say it, but you might be able to just walk in because I'm detracting you from my program, but you could honestly probably walk into a cyber program. I'm not saying immediately, but you look around and start seeing a lot of places look for IT backgrounds because you know a lot of the architectures already. What is the best way to build a resume for cyber without experience? That is a great question. And depends who you talk to. That I will have to say, it's a really hard question. And if without background, especially IT background, there are ways. You've probably heard me mention compliance a lot. There are rules. Like I said, it's always changing. I have never worked in another industry with more rules, because what separates the good guys from the bad guys are rules. And that's it. It's the same programs, literally the exact same technology. It's the rules that we have to follow. And there's a lot. So if you've ever worked in any like legal, if you've ever worked in any auditing is one of the biggest sides of cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is not breaking into other things. It's not. Like 10%, less than 10% actually do that job for organizations. It's protection. And so if you have any legal, if you have any, honestly, I tell my students this, cybersecurity is a melting pot of every single thing. If you've worked in construction, we've got stuff. How are you going to, if you know construction systems, that means you might know how construction computers maybe work. No one else does. It's called the SCADA system. There's so many things, and we got to protect everything. So it touches everything. So look at what you have, pair with someone, go on LinkedIn. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm never on LinkedIn. And that's purely because I'm terrible at opening apps on my phone. And nothing against you guys. You'll probably send me requests, and nothing against you. I will be like, I've checked LinkedIn on my birthday and I just forget to look at it. Like, it just sits there on my phone. I had like 300 missed messages, and I'm like, that's way too many for me to look at. But I'm sorry, but there are other people out there that I will say, especially on our team, you can look through there. email us. There's plenty of ways. Find cyber people. If you're in IT, going back to that, look around. There's someone in your company. This is what I say to everyone. Look inwards first. If you're already in an IT position or you're already in a company, your company probably has an IT or security team. Just ask, can you go meet them? That's it. I have a lot of people that just said, I just wanted to meet the person. And they're like, oh yeah, we're looking for people interested. That it was that simple.
And some companies actually partner up with Flatiron to do education training. So that is another option. If you're already in a career spot, then you can look into just advanced learning, like through your company directly. That's more on another side of what we do, but we offer classes for people within the industry to get to the level that their company wants them to be at for multiple different disciplines.
So the last question, because there's been a bunch, I'm sorry, and we're going over. Last question, in Ron, you said you work at a school district and you're trying to make it into security, but you're also looking for another opportunity. Do you have any recommendations? Honestly, I would hinder you from taking on that first security role. This is just me personally. A lot of people would push you to it, but there's a lot of legal, especially when it comes into school districts. You've got to take into account there's the federal information about the kids, and you got HIPAA, so you got to protect the students' health information. You got to make, so there's just a number of things. If you're the one person, and that's how it often goes, they maybe hire 1 or 2 people, and you're going to be that person. And if it goes wrong, you're the person. Doesn't matter if it's your fault. That is very, very, very integral information that you have to keep secret. And you might already work with that. If there's no security team, you might already have that IT information. That's your stuff. But I would be very careful, because if that gets out, that's you. There's no way around it. That's you. But if you want to take that challenge on, I know people that have. You go get auditing certs saying, yes, you are able to handle that data, follow the guidelines, and you could. That's a lot of work. And if you're brand new to this, that's more than I'd want to handle, because that's a lot of responsibility. Anyways, that's everything I've got.
Well, thank you again to everyone that came, and to Eric for putting on this amazing workshop tonight. As a reminder, you're going to receive a copy of the presentation within about 3 business days. So I would say no later than Tuesday of next week. If for some reason you don't receive it, we do put everything on our YouTube channel. And yeah, everybody have an amazing night. Thanks for coming.